Chains rattled on the auction block, until I stepped forward, defying them all with 3 words. She is mine! Thanks for tuning in. Before we dive into today's story, consider subscribing. It's the best way to make sure you never miss the next adventure. A rain-slicked frontier world, market stalls under neon glow, humans bartering with alien traders. Among the cages sits a red-furred vulpine woman, her luminous amber eyes full of pride despite her chains. The crowd jeers, buyers appraise her like livestock, but one human soldier, scarred, weary, stubborn, sees her differently. And with that choice, he tears open the fate of 2 lives. Rain dripped from the overhang of the market stalls, each droplet glowing in the neon shimmer of flickering signs. The colony's main square was alive with noise, merchants hawking contraband, miners blowing their pay, and soldiers looking for distraction. But the loudest sound came from the stage at the square's center, the auction block. I stood at the edge of the crowd, arms folded, hood pulled low. I'd seen my share of ugly things in war. But the sight before me dug deeper than any battlefield. Cages. Iron-barred, stacked in rows, each holding someone. Beaten aliens, war captives, deserters, the unlucky who'd fallen into debt. And tonight, the prize was no broken miner or prisoner. Tonight they paraded her. She was no animal, though the auctioneer barked as if she were. Red fur caught the light like molten copper, flowing across a frame too elegant for chains. Her ears twitched with every jeer, long and triangular, framing a face strikingly human yet touched with fox-like grace, sharp cheekbones, tapered nose, eyes burning gold under the dim light. A thick tail swayed behind her, as much defiance as it was exhaustion. The collar around her throat gleamed with cold steel. "Exotic catch, gentlemen!" the auctioneer bellowed, slapping the bars of her cage. "A pure-blood vulpine female. Rare breed, perfect for companionship, obedience training, or a fine display piece for any collection." The crowd laughed. Some whistled. I watched her shoulders tighten, her gaze fixed forward, refusing to look at the men shouting prices. Pride, even in chains. My gut twisted. "Starting bid, 500 credits." Voices rose. Numbers shouted. The bidding grew fevered, men calling out like jackals fighting over meat. She closed her eyes then, and for a moment her tail drooped, the smallest flicker of despair beneath all that defiance. That was when I moved. I pushed forward, ignoring the curses, the bodies I shoved aside. My boots hit the platform's edge just as another man shouted 600. "I'll pay," I said, my voice cutting through. The crowd quieted, some turning to glare. The auctioneer blinked, sizing me up. A scarred soldier with travel-worn gear wasn't the kind of bidder they wanted. "You've got coin, stranger?" he sneered. I reached into my coat, pulled out a worn cred chip, and slapped it against the rail. "Enough." The vulpine girl's eyes opened, flicking toward me, sharp, searching. For a second, I saw a question there. Not hope. Not yet. "Just why?" The auctioneer smirked. "You know the rules. Once sold, no returns, no complaints. You're buying property, soldier." That word. Property. I felt every scar on my body burn with memory, men treated like tools, comrades left behind because someone higher up counted their worth in numbers. And now they were doing the same to her. I looked the auctioneer dead in the eye. "She's not property." My voice carried further than I meant, but I didn't care. "She's mine." The square fell silent. Her ears flicked, her eyes widening, breath catching. And for the first time, her tail stilled completely. The auctioneer recovered first. "Big words," he drawled, feigning amusement, while his eyes slid toward the uniformed enforcers flanking the stage. "But coin speaks louder." I leaned on the rail, the crowd's heat pressing at my back. 700, I said, and pushed the chip toward the reader. "And she walks with me." A ripple moved through the square. 700 wasn't the highest bid that night, but it was enough to shift attention. Men who'd come for a novelty straightened, measuring me with the flat appraisal of predators who'd found an obstacle. The reader chirped green. The auctioneer's smile thinned. You're short of the last offer by 50. I slid another chit from an inside pocket and snapped it beside the first. Plus the dock tax you'd be evading by calling her livestock instead of passenger. I let that hang. The port authority had been cracking down for weeks. He could pocket my extra chit and look the other way, or gamble with the inspectors. His gaze sharpened. He'd heard the same rumors I had. The enforcers didn't move. Release the collar, I said. He gestured with a theatrical sigh. A handler fumbled keys, opened the cage, and stepped in. She didn't flinch when he touched her neck. She just stared past him, chin lifted, as if the touch belonged to a dream that hadn't reached her skin. When the collar clicked open, she flexed her shoulders slowly, like a soldier checking the fit of armor. The handler went to grab her wrist. Don't. My voice hit the boards like a hammer. The handler froze. The square watched. I put my palm out, fingers open, and looked at her, not at her fur, not at her ears, not at the curve of hip and shoulder the crowd had ogled. I looked into her eyes. May I? I asked, motioning to the chain loop through the ring at her wrists. She cocked her head. Amber narrowed around a slit pupil, assessing me. The handler's breath hitched. He was 2 heartbeats from lashing out just to prove he existed. She stepped forward first. A small nod. I took the chain. Up close, the rain brought her scent to me, warm and clean despite the cage, a breath of cedar bark and something bright, like citrus crushed under a boot. Her fur wasn't uniform. It grated from deep auburn along the spine to softer copper at her arms, the inside of her ears velvet pale. A thin scar nicked the jawline, another traced the collarbone, and vanished beneath the simple cloth hung like a tunic. Someone had dressed her to be palatable. They hadn't managed to make her small. My multi-tool whispered. The chain fell. She flexed, wrists free. The handler made a sound. I heard the shift of boots as someone decided the moment had passed for outrage. Done, the auctioneer said too brightly. A pleasure doing business. Not yet, a voice growled from the crowd. The men who'd been bidding hardest stepped forward, 3 of them in vests too clean for real labor, knuckles scarred from paying others to fight. The tallest wore a ring made from a fused coin, the kind enforcers quietly admired when drinks loosened tongues. You interfered in a private arrangement, he said. We had an understanding. You had a price, I said. I paid it. You underbid by 50. The house took a dock tax cut, I said, not looking away. You going to argue with the port authority? He glanced at the auctioneer, who had already smoothed his face into innocence. The tall man's lip curled. She's not walking out without us. She stood still beside me, tail heavy with the weight of 100 hungry eyes. Not a tremble. Not a plea. Pride coiled like a blade. Then take it up with law, I said, and lifted my hood an inch so he could see the worn insignia stitched inside. Former colonial infantry, honorably discharged, quartermaster's stamp still visible. It wasn't a shield, but it was an old kind of respect. Men like him understood it when it hurt their plans. Silence stretched. A shutter banged in the rain. The tall man stepped back. We'll take it up, he said finally, and his smile was thin as wire. Enjoy your passenger. They didn't follow us off the stage. That was almost worse. We moved as the crowd parted, some disappointed, some curious, a few with a brief flicker of relief in their eyes that someone had interrupted the usual ritual. The square spilled into narrow streets where rainwater turned dust into red mud. Neon sputtered over rusted awnings. The night smelled of oil, ozone from the shuttle towers, and fried peppers curling on iron griddles. She kept pace at my shoulder, silent. I didn't offer to touch her. I didn't offer to lead. I just walked, keeping my hand near my coat's inside pocket where the shocker rested and the encrypted chit with the last of my savings sat snug against a sealed letter I hadn't found the courage to send. We ducked under an awning where a trio of miners argued about shifts. I stopped in the shadow beside a closed tool shop, turned, and met her eyes again. Are you hurt? I asked. Her ears angled forward. A pause. Then, a careful answer in trade cant, accented but precise. No. I can get you to a clinic, I said. Or I can get you far from here. Your choice. Choice. She tasted the word with an unreadable expression. The rain hissed. When she finally spoke, it was with a quiet that didn't match the ferocity I'd seen. You said she's mine? I said it to stop them, I answered. To put a wall between you and men who only understand walls. I don't own you. I let the truth steady my voice. My name is Arden. Jace Arden. I'm headed to the North Ridge to hitch cargo. You want off this rock, I can get you there. Her gaze traveled over my face like a map she didn't trust. I am not cargo. No, I said. You're a person. And you get to decide where your feet go. She looked down, just briefly, at her bare feet dark with wet dust. When she lifted her head again, something softer lived in her eyes. I am Vesha, she said. The name came like a blade sliding home, clean, final, with a weight behind it. Of House Rin. You're far from your house. It burned, she said. No dramatics. No tremor. Just fact. The men who kept the ledger bought the ashes. I nodded once, because I had nothing worthy to lay beside that sentence. North Ridge, she said then, more brisk. We go. We went. The North Ridge wasn't gentle country. The town clung to the base of it like a stubborn vine, cheap prefab blocks climbing into scrub and rock. Above the last row of lit windows, the world opened into wind-scoured slopes spiked with heat-dulled faro that once might have supported conveyors. We took the goat track, moving quick, because we weren't alone. I didn't look back often. Looking back spooks pursuers into acting before they're ready. But I listened. Somewhere below, boots had started following. Not the enforcers. They'd have come loud. The bidders, then, or their hire. The rain made everything slower, quieter. We climbed. Those men, Vesha said, breath steady. They will not bring law. No, I said. They'll bring reasons. She considered that, then snorted softly. Humans make many reasons. We do, I admitted. And break them like twigs. Those ones do, I said. Others keep them like bones. Her ear flicked. The turn of her head caught me off guard, humor there, dry as flint. Which are you, Jace Arden? Both, I said before I could polish it. Depending on the day. We crested a ledge and hunkered in the shadow of a buckled girder to watch the switchback below. 3 men threaded up it, 1 tall, 2 limber, the kind that could sprint a rooftop and not break a sweat. The tall one had the coin ring. Same men, Vesha said. Same men. I checked the shocker. Short range. Enough to drop one clean if I got the prongs to skin. I hated the idea of killing this close to the port. It tightened nets in ways that trapped the wrong people. Do we run? She asked. Running invites bullets. I scanned the slope. The ridge cut back left toward abandoned loading spines. Past that, the old Ortono nested like a black mouth in the rock. If we could reach it, the storm would erase our traces and the dark would cover the rest. We move slow, I said, and make it expensive to follow. Vesha nodded, and when she moved, she flowed. Not showy. Not theatrical. Just efficient. Weight low, steps finding the dry stone under the slick without looking, tail balanced like a counterweight to the pack she didn't have. I kept pace and tried not to think about how many times I'd walked alone like this and told myself it was better that way. We reached the loading spines. Broken cranes rose around us like skeletons with iron throats. I paused to pry a rusted bolt free, palmed it, then set it on the lip of the spine's edge. Vesha watched my hands without asking. I palmed 2 more and dropped them where any heavy foot would send them skittering loud enough to wake the dead. We moved again. The men below gained ground. Why help me? She said, not quite a question. Because a small boy once watched a soldier refuse a bribe to look the other way. Because I'd counted the men the war taught me to call acceptable losses and seen their names tear holes in their mothers. Because I was tired of telling myself I was clean because I didn't own a chain. Because I was there, I said instead, and my voice roughened. On their side of the rail, once. I watched a woman in a cage refuse to bow her head. I did nothing. That day has lasted too long. She glanced at me, not pity, not thanks. Recognition. The first of the bolts skittered as the tall man hit it wrong. He swore, slipped, and grabbed for the rail. The second man plowed into his back. The third fanned out, cleverer than he looked. I swore under my breath. Vesha had already moved, hand touching my wrist briefly, permission, warning, or simply the fact of herself existing in my space. Tunnel, she murmured. We ran. The ore tunnel's mouth yawned into stale cold that smelled of damp stone and old machines. I pulled a lamp from my coat, tapped it to life, and painted the black with a soft pool of color. The tunnel had been picked clean of anything valuable, but the bones of carts still lined the track edges. We slipped around a collapsed section and crouched behind a ridge of fallen ore. Footsteps entered. The tall man's voice bounced off the rock. They're in here. I pressed a finger to my lips. Vesha's breathing didn't change. The men came in careful, because even stupid men got wise when the dark pressed close and the world narrowed to cone of light and the edge of hearing. I waited until the second man drifted a step ahead of the others, then stood. The lamp cut to black. I stepped into their beam and fired the shocker from 5 paces. The prongs hit throat. The man dropped like a sack of wet grain. The tall man fired blind. The crack of a slug ricocheted into the roof with a hot squeal. Vesha moved while he flinched. She slid along the opposite wall and struck his wrist. The gun skittered. The third man lunged toward her tail. She pivoted, caught his arm at the elbow, and guided his weight into the wall so hard his breath left in a stunned groan. Enough, I snapped, because killing here would stain everything. You get one chance. The tall man glared at me over the fallen lamp's glow. We'll find you. He spat. The man who owns you now. She is unowned, Vesha said, and the words carried a blade's edge. Carry that truth back to your masters. He sneered. You hear that, pet? He bought you just to. I stepped on his wrist until the coin ring bit bone. You come after us again, I said softly. And I stopped being careful. We left them in the dark with their pride and their lies and the copper taste of fear in their mouths. The ore tunnel spat us out half a click above the ridge road. From there it was an hour's slog across scrub to the cargo pads. The storm had chewed the clouds into ragged mouths that showed stars between their teeth. The pads glowed pale blue in the distance, stacked crates and parked lifters standing like blocky constellations. I led us to the fence, found the loose panel I'd used a dozen times when the wrong shifts were posted, and slid us through. Vesha's tail brushed my coat. She didn't apologize. She didn't thank me. She angled her ears toward the hum of the compressors as if listening to a language she had known in childhood and had almost forgotten. Stay close, I said. Rig 19 owes me favors. Favors, she repeated dryly. Another human currency. As good as coins sometimes. We wove between crates until Rig 19 rose ahead. A scuffed long-haul hauler with a belly big enough for small dreams and a mainline pilot who never asked questions so long as questions didn't cost time. Maddie leaned against the loading ramp, chewing a strip of something that claimed to be beef. Her hair was cut to bristle under a skullcap. The tattoo at her throat glowed faintly, a map that only meant anything to 3 people in the system. You're late, she said, then looked past me and raised a brow. And accompanied. Need jump passage, I said. 2 berths. Low profile. Low profile walked in with ears, Maddie observed, but there was no mockery in it. She'd hauled refugees before. Who's trouble? Local, I said. Ugly, but not political. That's what men say before I take fire from 3 factions. She eyed Vesha, then looked back at me, eyes sharpening in a way I recognized. We'd bled out of the same kind of nights. Births cost double if I'm lying on the manifest. I'm not asking for free. You never do. She flicked the strip into her mouth. Chewed. 1,200. I'd expected 8. I didn't let it show. 10. I said. 11 in a favor I collect later. She said. That won't break your bones or mine. I glanced at Vesha. She said nothing, but her tail tip twitched once, as if acknowledging that the game had rules and we were playing them fairly. I offered Maddie my hand. Done. We boarded. The hauler's belly smelled like metal, hot circuits, and lemon cleaner someone had sprayed with optimism. Maddie assigned us a narrow bunk alcove with a curtain and a lock that would keep out opportunists but not professionals. I closed the curtain and stood in the close space with Vesha, suddenly aware that the floor had shifted from mud to steel, from fight to the exhausted quiet that comes when you know the immediate danger lies outside this room. I gestured to the small sink. You can wash, I said. I'll take first watch topside, see if any of Coinling's boys sniffed us this far. She watched me, eyes reflecting the dim bunk light like liquid gold. You told those men you would stop being careful, she said. I did. She stepped closer, close enough that the heat of her fur turned the thin ship air into something like a memory of hearth. Be careful with me, she said. Not plea. Instruction. I am not tame. I met that steady gaze. Good, I said. I don't know what to do with tame. A small thing changed in her posture, something unclenching that I would only understand years later. She nodded toward the hatch. Go. Watch. I will wash. I slipped out. The curtain closed behind me with a whisper like a secret promised. On the catwalk above the cargo bay, I stood in the humming dark and let my body come down from alert. The storm was rolling east. The pads glittered with rain. At the far edge of the yard, a group of silhouettes smoked and argued. None of them wore coin rings. For now we were ghosts. I told myself I'd done enough for one night. Then I told myself that enough was a word for men who slept fine through other people's nightmares. When I went back down, the curtain was open. Vesha had washed the dust from her fur, face, and hands with the stubborn economy of someone who'd learned to make a thimble of water do a bucket's work. Without the grime, the red of her coat sang, and the lines of her face sharpened from exotic into something indivisible, a woman with a history too complicated for a ledger. She had folded the scrap tunic. It lay on the bunk like a discarded lie. She had draped herself in the ship blanket like a cloak, makeshift and dignified. She tilted her head at the lock. Will this keep men out who think reasons are twigs? It'll keep most honest men honest, I said. The rest requires teeth. She bared hers briefly in a vulpine smile. Mates in my house keep watch in pairs, she said. Eyes on different doors. Backs pressed warm. The words snared me. Mates? In my language, she said, touching her chest lightly, a mate is not owner. It is vow. It is a line drawn in wind and made stone. You say mine and think cage or ring. I say mine and mean, if winter comes, I will bring meat. If summer brings snakes, I will bite them first. I didn't breathe for a beat. The ship hummed underfoot. Somewhere Maddie cursed at a stuck bolt. I don't deserve that word, I said. No one deserves it, Vesha replied. You choose it, and then become it. She looked toward the hatch and back. You threw a wall from me with your mouth. The wall will not hold. Men who like money will chew it. So now you must choose what it was. I could feel the night slot into place around me like a mechanism waiting for a push. I could walk to the cockpit, pay Maddie the 1,100 and the favor, and vanish on some other border while Vesha vanished on hers. I could pretend the wall I'd thrown would hold without me. I'll keep watch, I said, and sat on the floor with my back against the bunk, close enough that the blanket's edge brushed my shoulder. And when the chewing starts, we'll make teeth of our own. Vesha slid down behind me, back to back, warmth finding the place between my shoulder blades that had ached since the war. We didn't speak for a long time. The ship's heart beat below us, steady and patient, like it knew where we were going even if we didn't. Outside, somewhere in the maze of crates and rain, a man with a coin ring made a call that would pull on strings we hadn't seen yet. Inside, behind a soft curtain and a simple lock, a wall I'd built with 3 reckless words remade itself into something older than law. The ship jolted awake with a hiss of hydraulics and the grind of gears older than most colonists on this rock. Maddie's voice carried over the intercom, cool and amused. "Strap in, ghosts. We're burning sky in 30. I stayed by the bunk, making sure Vesha had the straps worked out. The harness was built for human shoulders, but she adjusted it with the clever hands of someone who'd solved harder puzzles in worse places. Her tail flicked once, irritated by the tight quarters, then coiled against her thigh with practiced discipline. "You've flown before?" I asked. Her ear twitched. "Not in ships made of rust and chewing gum." I grinned despite myself. "Then you've flown in better than most out here." She didn't smile back, but the edge of her gaze softened. The hauler roared as it lifted, shaking dust from the seams. My stomach dropped, then the pad lights vanished into cloud, and we were clear of the colony. For a long moment, there was only the groan of stressed metal and the steady thump of my heart. We'd made it out. That was the dangerous illusion of first flight, thinking escape was the same as safety. 3 days into the drift, routine settled in. Maddie kept the hauler on course and out of the lanes that flagged attention. I traded labor for passage, fixing wiring, patching filters, crawling through ducts that squealed at the indignity of use. Vesha moved in silence at first, observing. She walked the catwalks like they were forest paths, light-footed, measuring the angles of bulkhead and shadow. She wasn't restless. She was cataloging. One night, over the dry hiss of ration burners, she finally spoke. "Why did you leave your war?" The question dropped like a stone in a still pool. I set the tin down, stared at the thick paste inside. "Because I was tired of watching men like me decide who counted as human enough to save. And you were human." "Barely," I said. "Uniform made me human when it suited command. When it didn't, I was numbers on a list. And numbers are cheap." She studied me. Then she said very quietly, "My people fought beside your command once. We believed it meant something. When the front burned, they sold us to your enemies instead. Cheaper that way." I looked up. Her ears were angled back, tail stiff with memory. "They didn't all agree," I said. "Some of us." She cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. "Some of you hid behind rules. Some watched. Some bought." Her eyes burned. "You are not the first human to say I am not property." I didn't flinch. "But I'll be the last who lets the chain stay." Silence stretched. Then, to my surprise, her tail eased. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The hunters came on day 5. We'd cut drift early, planning to skim a refueling station in the Eris belt. Maddie's scanners caught the blip before eyes could. Small, fast craft, no registry, no transponder. Wolves against a plodding ox. "Friends of yours?" Maddie asked me, teeth flashing. "Not mine." She muttered something about bad luck, flipped toggles, and the hauler groaned as engines pushed harder. The blip closed anyway. Vesha appeared at my side, ears sharp, tail lashing once. "It is them." "The buyers?" I asked. "The kind who don't let walls stand." The first salvo hit. Shields spat blue fire. Cargo containers rattled like dice in a cup. Maddie swore. "Can't outrun them. Best we can do is bleed them until they think it's not worth the fuel." I grabbed the shock rifle from the rack, checked the cell. My veins thrummed. I'd fought wars in deserts, on rooftops, in alleys where the sky never showed. Fighting in vacuum was different, but the math was the same. Men wanted something, and we had to make the cost too high. "I fight," Vesha said. "You're not trained for boarding combat." I snapped. Her ears flattened, her teeth flashed. "I was bred to be trained for cages. You saw how well that held." I opened my mouth. closed it again. Handed her a shock baton instead. Stay behind me. Aim for joints. Her fingers closed around the weapon like it belonged there. The wolves latched on with a screech of metal. The hauler bucked, gravity fighting to hold steady. Maddie sealed the bulkheads, shouting through the calm. If they breach, we keep them bottled. Don't let them near the drive. The first cutter tore through aft hull. 2 men came crawling in, armored light, visors black. I leveled the rifle, fired, blue arc snapped, and the first man spasmed, body twitching. Vesha darted past me before I could stop her, tail whipping for balance as she slammed the baton into the second intruder's knee. He roared. She struck again, fluid, precise, and the shock flared. I covered her flank, dropping the first as he staggered up. The smell of burnt circuitry mixed with ozone and sweat. Vesha breathed hard, chest rising, ears quivering with focus. You fight like you mean to live, I said. I fight like I already died once, she answered. More were coming. Boots thundered in the ducts. Maddie cursed in our ears. 2 more cutters. They want her bad. Vesha's eyes met mine. And in that second I knew the truth. Claiming her as mine hadn't just made me her shield. It had painted a target on both of us, a mark that wouldn't wash off with any amount of running. They won't stop, I said. No, she agreed. So we stopped them. And together, in the narrow belly of a dying ship, we prepared to make our stand. The ship shuddered again as another cutter slammed home. Red lights spun across the bulkheads, alarms wailing in a pitch that drilled straight into bone. Maddie's voice crackled over the calm, harsh with strain. They've cut us fore and aft. If you're going to make a stand, do it now. I braced against the bulkhead, rifle steady. Vesha crouched beside me, her tail stiff with tension, golden eyes slitted to narrow focus. In that glow, she looked less like the caged girl from the auction block and more like something forged out of fire and defiance. Boots hit metal. A spray of sparks as the forward hatch gave way. 4 figures in light armor surged through. I fired first, a shot bolt slamming into the lead man's chest. He went down screaming. The others spread out with practiced precision, mercs, not amateurs. One leveled a pulse pistol. I dragged Vesha down behind cover as blue fire scorched the wall where her head had been. She darted out the other side like quicksilver, baton snapping into the gunman's wrist. He howled, weapon clattering. She didn't hesitate, jammed the baton into his ribs until the light died from his visor. I rose in sync, squeezing off shots that dropped the third. The fourth lunged for me, blade crackling with charge. His weight slammed me into the wall. My rifle went skittering. His breath was hot against my cheek, teeth bared behind his visor. Then Vesha was there. She leapt, claws unsheathed from fingertips I hadn't realized hid them. The sound was primal, metal screeching as she tore through visor and face beneath. He crumpled, twitching. We froze in the aftermath, chest heaving, the corridor stinking of ozone and blood. Her hands dripped red. She looked at me, almost daring me to flinch. I didn't. I met her gaze steady. You saved me. She bared her teeth, not a smile. Something rawer. We save each other. That is what mates do. The word hung in the air, heavier than the bodies at our feet. Before I could answer, Maddie's voice screamed through the calm. Breach in engineering. They're after the drive core. If they take it, we're dead in space. We ran. The engineering bay was chaos, steam venting from ruptured pipes, warning lights strobing in sickly amber. 3 mercs circled the drive core, tools in hand, trying to disengage the failsafes. Another kept Maddie pinned against the wall, knife at her throat. Drop it! He barked when we burst in. I didn't drop. I fired. He convulsed, knife skittering as he collapsed. Maddie shoved him off, grabbing for the emergency seal controls. Vesha darted forward, tail lashing, baton striking one saboteur's knee. He screamed, buckled. I charged the second, fist slamming, rage boiling out until his helmet cracked under my knuckles. The third spun, blaster rising. And Vesha was faster. She vaulted the railing, tail snapping for balance, and landed square on his shoulders. Claws flashed, tearing wires and flesh alike. He crumpled under her weight. Silence fell, broken only by the wheeze of failing vents. Maddie wiped blood from her mouth, glaring at us both. You two bring more heat than a reactor on overload. They'll keep coming, I said, breathing hard. This wasn't a raid. This was a hunt. Maddie spat. For her. Vesha didn't deny it. Her chest rose and fell, golden eyes steady. They think I belong to them. That my name is a chain they can drag. Her voice lowered, rough with something I'd never heard from her before. But my name is Vesha of Rin. And I am done being sold. The words settled like iron in the room. That was when the hauler lurched, harder than before. Gravity flickered. Maddie's eyes went wide. They've locked a tow line. We're caught. I felt the floor tilt under me, the hum of the engine straying. We weren't flying free anymore, we were being reeled in. Where? I asked. Maddie's face was grim. Colonial Authority Station. And trust me, those bastards don't care about buyers or sellers. They care about law. And law says she's contraband. Vesha's ears flattened. My fists clenched. We'd escaped the market, the mercs, the hunters. But now we were flying straight into the jaws of the system itself, the kind of cage that wore the mask of justice. And this time, words alone wouldn't break it. The cells aboard the authority station were nothing like the cages in the market square, but a prison was a prison no matter the polish. Smooth walls hummed faintly with suppressor fields. A transparent barrier buzzed between us and the corridor. No chains, no collars. Just the quiet suggestion that resistance would cook you from the inside out. They'd split us at first. Hauled Vesha one way, me another. I'd fought hard enough that they gave up trying to drag me and just stunned me unconscious. When I woke, she was back across from me in the same cell. Her fur was ruffled where they'd handled her roughly, but her eyes burned bright. She hadn't folded. We sat in silence at first, the hum of the field our only company. Maddie had been taken elsewhere, cargo impounded, ships sealed. The hunters would already be greasing palms to push their claim. Does it feel the same? I asked finally, voice low. Vesha's ears angled toward me. What? Being caged again. Her lips curled, not in anger but in something sharper. It feels different. Then I was alone. No. Her gaze locked on mine, steady, unblinking. Now there's a human who swore I am not property. Who said mine and made the word mean shield instead of collar. Heat prickled at the back of my neck. I leaned against the wall, watching her. That word carries weight with your people, doesn't it? Mate. She tilted her head. Among my kind, it is more binding than law. Two choose, and the clan cannot unmake it. It is vowed deeper than blood. Not bought. Not sold. Chosen. And you think that word fits us? Her tail flicked once, slowly, like the punctuation of a truth she hadn't meant to share but would not retract. You fight beside me. You bled for me. You did not turn away when my claws drew blood. Tell me, Jace Arden, what more does a vow require? I swallowed hard. There was no mockery in her tone, no play at manipulation. Just the weight of a culture that saw bonds where mine saw contracts. I don't want to chain you to me, I said. Not after what you've lived. Her gaze softened, ears dipping. It is no chain if I put it there myself. The words stirred something raw inside me, something I hadn't let myself feel since before the war. Belonging, not to a uniform, not to a cause, but to another living soul. I slid closer across the bench, lowering my voice. If I accept that vow, there's no going back. Her tail brushed my knee, light as a whisper. Good. Then we go forward. The barrier hummed, uncaring. But in that sterile cage, surrounded by the machinery of a system ready to strip us both of choice, we carved something they couldn't touch, a quiet pact, fragile and fierce. I leaned my head back against the wall, breathing slow. For the first time in years, the fear in my chest wasn't just about dying. It was about losing someone I hadn't expected to find. When the guards came, they found us sitting shoulder to shoulder, silent and unbroken. They didn't understand the look that passed between us as they ordered us up, shackled our wrists, and marched us toward the tribunal. But I understood. And so did she. They marched us into the tribunal hall under the cold white glare of overhead lamps. The chamber wasn't built for justice, it was built for display. Tiered seats rose in a semicircle, filled with officials in pressed uniforms and merchants in gleaming silks. Above them, holos recorded every word, every gesture, to archive the illusion of law. At the center stood a raised dais with 3 judges seated like carved idols. Authority robes draped their shoulders, each bearing the sigil of the colony's trade council, a hammer striking a chain. Behind them, a massive banner proclaimed order through ownership. My gut tightened. This wasn't going to be a hearing. It was going to be another auction, dressed in ceremony. The guards shoved me forward, forcing me to my knees. Vesha followed, tail bristling, chin high. They hadn't broken her stance. If anything, the spectacle seemed to harden her resolve. One of the judges, a narrow-eyed man with a voice like gravel, spoke first. Jace Arden, human male. You stand accused of theft of bonded property, assault upon licensed traders, and willful interference in authority commerce. The crowd murmured approval. He turned his gaze on Vesha. And you, specimen catalogued as V114, known as vulpine stock, are contraband under interstellar accord. By law, you have no right to self-determination. Vesha's ears flattened, but she didn't bow. My name, she said, voice carrying across the hall, is Vesha of Rin. A ripple of unease. The judge's lips curled. Names do not change property. I felt the words crack something deep inside me. I forced myself to my feet despite the guard's shove. She's not property. The hall went still. The judge's gaze snapped to me. You overstep, soldier. The law is clear. No, I said, my voice loud enough to echo. I turned so the whole hall could see me, see her standing beside me with pride burning in her eyes. She is not property. She is mine. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The judge sneered. You admit to theft, then? Not theft, I said, holding Vesha's gaze. Mate. The word fell like a thunderclap. Merchants muttered, officials leaned forward, the gallery broke into a storm of disbelief. Mate. Not owner, not buyer, equal, chosen, sacred in her culture. And dangerous in mine, because it cut through the authorities' whole illusion of order. Vesha's tail flicked once, golden eyes locked on me, blazing. She stepped closer, pressing her shoulder to mine, voice ringing clear. Yes. Mate. I claim him before clan and star. By vow of Rin, unbroken by fire or chain. The hall erupted, shouts, curses, laughter, outrage. The judges pounded for silence, but the chaos only grew. The gravel-voiced judge leaned forward, venom in his tone. You cannot rewrite law with words. No, I shot back. But you can't rewrite truth either. And every soul here just heard it. The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. For the first time, fear flickered in the judge's eyes, not fear of me, but of the seed planted in the crowd. A human and an alien, standing not as owner and pet but as mates. A truth too dangerous to cage. The hall broke into chaos. Some merchants shouted for blood, waving contracts and ledgers in the air like holy scripture. Others jeered at the judges, demanding to know if the authority was so weak it could not even hold a single alien girl against a soldier's words. Guards moved in, batons raised, but the noise surged louder than their discipline. It was the wrong kind of noise, the sound of a crowd realizing the mask of law was just painted tin. Vesha gripped my hand through the shackles, her claws pricking my skin. No, she hissed. 2 guards lunged. I met them head-on, swinging the chains that bound my wrists. Metal cracked bone, one man fell with a cry. Vesha spun, tail whipping as she drove a kick into the other's chest. He toppled into the front row, sending a merchant sprawling. The room erupted. Some surged forward, trying to restrain us. Others surged away, desperate to escape the storm. Shouts blurred into a roar. From the back of the chamber, a door burst open and Maddie strode in, blood on her temple, a shock pistol in hand. "I told you two ghosts you bring too much heat," she shouted, firing a bolt that dropped a guard mid-step. "Move!" We bolted. The tribunal dais dissolved into panic as more guards poured in, struggling to push through the stampede of officials. I shoved one aside, ripping his stun stick free and passing it to Vesha. She twirled at once, golden eyes gleaming with fire. The three of us crashed through the side door into a service corridor. Alarms blared overhead, scarlet lights strobing. The walls shook with the thunder of boots behind us. "Dock 3, Maddie snapped, leading the way. "If we can reach the shuttle, we've got a shot." We ran, breath tearing, chains clattering with every step. Vesha stayed at my side, her tail lashing to balance as we careened around corners. Twice she struck out at guards who blocked our path, swift, brutal blows that left them gasping. The corridor spilled into a wide hangar. Rows of shuttles gleamed under floodlights. But the moment we entered, klaxons wailed and blast doors began to lower. "Faster!" Maddie barked. We sprinted across the deck, dodging scattered crates. Vesha's hand never left mine. My lungs burned, muscles screaming, but the feel of her fingers, warm, strong, unyielding, pulled me forward. A squad of authority soldiers spilled from the far side, rifles raised. Too many. Too fast. Vesha skidded to a halt beside me, her ears flat, chest heaving. "They will not let us leave." "Then we make them." The soldiers advanced. And then, above the din, a voice boomed from the gallery overlooking the hangar. "Let them go!" Every head turned. A merchant, one of the wealthiest by his robes, stood at the rail. His face was pale, but his voice carried. "If the authority cannot keep its own house, then let them go and cut your losses. Better one foxgirl and her soldier vanish than this farce drag every contract into question." Murmurs surged. Soldiers hesitated. I didn't waste a moment. I grabbed Vesha's wrist, shouted to Maddie, and we sprinted again, straight for the nearest shuttle. The blast doors screeched shut behind us as we dove through the hatch. Maddie slammed the controls, engines roaring to life. Gunfire rattled against the hull, but the shuttle tore free of its clamps, blasting upward. Through the viewport, the hangar shrank into chaos, guards shouting, merchants scattering, judges pounding fists to no avail. Beside me, Vesha pressed her forehead against mine, her breath ragged, her voice a whisper only I could hear. "They tried to sell me as a pet," she said. "But you claimed me as mate. And now, Jace Arden, you are mine." The stars opened wide before us, cold, and endless, and free. The shuttle rattled hard as it broke atmosphere, the hull groaning like an old beast shaking off its chains. Maddie cursed at the controls, fingers dancing across cracked screens, coaxing more speed from engines that hadn't been meant for heroics. Outside, the stars spread vast and black, streaked with the faint glow of distant stations and trade lanes. We'd made it out, but freedom always came with a price. Vesha sagged against the seat beside me, ears angled back, tail twitching as her breathing slowed. She hadn't once let go of my hand since we ran. Now, in the dim light of the shuttle, she studied me with that fierce, unreadable gaze. "You meant it," she said. Not a question. I did. My throat was dry, words scraping out like gravel. I meant every damned syllable. Her claws flexed lightly against my palm, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me they were there. "Among my people, such a vow cannot be broken without blood. If I am your mate, I will fight at your side until the stars themselves grow cold." Something in my chest shifted, a weight I hadn't known I carried sliding away. For years I'd been a ghost, walking battlefields and backwater colonies like I'd already been buried. Now, with her, there was fire again. I leaned closer, voice low. "Then I'll match it. If winter comes, I'll bring meat. If summer brings snakes, I'll strike first." Her golden eyes widened, a shimmer catching at their edges. And for the first time since I'd met her, her tail brushed against me not as balance or defense, but with the slow, deliberate sweep of trust. Maddie snorted from the cockpit. Stars above, you two are making O's while I'm trying to keep us from boiling in the engine wash. Where are we headed? I asked. Anywhere but here. Maddie's tone sharpened. But listen close, authority won't forgive this. You embarrassed them in their own hall. You made them look weak. They'll come hunting. I met Vesha's gaze. She didn't flinch. Then let them, she said. We didn't land on any station within authority reach. Instead, Maddie set us down on a half-forgotten moon, the kind of place where only smugglers and outcasts built homes. The air was thin, the ground a patchwork of frost and rock, but there were domes scattered in the valleys, lit with the glow of stubborn lives. We stepped off the shuttle together. The sky above was vast and clear, stars sharp enough to cut. Vesha turned slowly, ears angling, tail flicking as she drank it in. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. No cages. No cages, I echoed. She faced me then, the cold light painting her fur a fiery red, eyes blazing like embers. Then this is where we begin. Not as pet and master. Not as prisoner and rescuer. As mates. I lifted my hand, brushing my knuckles against her cheek. Warmth bled into me at the touch. As mates, I said, and the words felt like iron hammered into the shape of truth. Her tail curled around my leg, claiming me in the old way of her kind. And with that simple gesture I knew I was bound, not by chain, not by law, but by choice. By something stronger than either. Behind us, the shuttle's engines cooled with a sigh. Ahead of us stretched a life uncertain, hunted, dangerous. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt alive. They tried to sell her as a pet. The galaxy will remember her as my mate. Reaching this point means you're a true fan of these tales. Comment below with your state or country. I'd love to see where our community is listening from.